Aliens thought the human warship was abandoned, until it opened every missile bay at once. The war between the Kryzen Ascendancy and the human race had lasted 11 years. It began as a small border dispute near a dead star called Threshold, and it grew into something that swallowed whole star systems. The Kryzen were tall, gray-skinned beings, with 4 eyes, and a strict military culture. They believed that any species that could not defend its own territory did not deserve to keep it. Humans, in their eyes, were soft, disorganized, and doomed to lose. For most of the war, that belief seemed correct. The Kryzen fleets were larger, their ships were faster, their weapons were more advanced. Human colonies fell one after another, and the Terran Defense Fleet, or TDF, was pushed back again and again. But the humans had one trait that the Kryzen never fully understood. They did not fight fair. They set traps. They lied about their strength. They pretended to be weak when they were strong, and pretended to be strong when they were weak. The Kryzen called this behavior dishonorable. The humans called it Tuesday. This story begins in a quiet part of space called the Hollow Deep, a region filled with drifting rock, dead moons, and the wreckage of old battles. It was here that a Kryzen scout ship, the Vantar's Eye, found something unusual. The scout ship's sensor officer, a young Kryzen named HFY, was the first to see it. He was running a routine sweep of the debris field when a large shape appeared on his screen. At first he thought it was just another piece of wreckage, one of hundreds scattered across the region. But this shape was too smooth, too symmetrical. It had a hull, it had shape, it had purpose. "Commander," Desic said, his 4 eyes blinking in surprise. "I am reading a large vessel, drifting, approximately 200,000 kilometers from our position. Configuration matches human warship design, class unknown." The commander of the Vantar's Eye was a veteran officer named Threx Kadomi. He had fought in over 30 engagements against the humans, and had learned to respect their unpredictability, even if he did not respect their culture. He walked to the sensor station and looked at the readings himself. "No power signature," he said. "No engine heat, no shield activity, no weapons charge." "It appears to be dead, Commander," Desic said. "A derelict." Threx studied the shape on the screen for a long moment. The ship was massive, easily 3 kilometers from bow to stern, with a hull design he recognized from intelligence reports. It matched the profile of a Dreadnought-class human warship, one of the largest and most heavily armed vessels the humans possessed. If it was truly abandoned, if it was truly dead, then it represented an enormous prize: human weapon technology, human shield technology, perhaps even their encrypted communication systems, all sitting there for the taking. "Any life signs?" Threx asked. "None detected, Commander. The hull shows heavy damage on the port side, multiple hull breaches. I am also detecting scorch patterns, consistent with plasma fire, and there are several small craft, likely escape pods, missing from their docking clamps." This matched a story that made sense. A battle had happened here, weeks or months ago, and the human ship had lost. Its crew had evacuated. It had drifted here ever since, alone and forgotten, while its systems slowly died from lack of maintenance. "Designation of the vessel?" Threx asked. Desic ran the ship's markings through the translation database. It took a moment, because the hull paint was faded and cracked in places. Finally, the answer appeared on the screen. "UNS Widow's Vale, Commander. Terran Defense Fleet Registry, Dreadnought class." Threx had heard of this ship before. It had a reputation. The Widow's Vale had fought in 3 major battles during the war, and in each one, it had inflicted heavy losses on Kryzen forces before somehow escaping destruction. Some Kryzen officers believed the ship was cursed. Others believed its captain was simply skilled. Either way, finding it here, dead and abandoned, was a significant discovery. "This is worth reporting to the fleet," Threx said. "But first, I want a closer look." He ordered the Vantar's Eye to approach slowly, sensors at maximum sensitivity, weapons on standby. As they closed the distance, more details of the derelict became visible. The hull was indeed heavily damaged. Long black scars ran along its flank, evidence of intense combat. Several of its weapon turrets were bent or destroyed. One of its engine nacelles was completely torn away, drifting nearby, connected to the main hull only by a tangle of broken cables and support beams. And yet, despite all this damage, The ship's basic shape remained intact. Its hull had not broken apart. Its main structure had held together. This was either very good engineering, or very good luck, or both. Scan for any active systems, Threx ordered. Desic worked his console for several minutes. Nothing active, Commander. Life support appears to be offline. There is a faint residual heat signature near the ship's core, but that is consistent with a slowly cooling reactor, not an active power source. I would estimate the ship has been drifting, powerless, for at least 6 to 8 weeks. Threx nodded slowly. 6 to 8 weeks was enough time for any surviving crew to have died from lack of oxygen, food, or water, assuming they had not evacuated. It was also enough time for any automated defense systems to have drained their backup batteries completely. By every measure his sensors could provide, the Widow's Veil was truly, completely dead. He called his superior, Fleet Admiral Korash Belton, aboard the flagship Ashen Talon, which was currently 3 days away at standard cruising speed, coordinating a larger offensive against human colonies in the nearby Perrin sector. Admiral, Threx said, we have located the derelict human warship Widow's Veil, drifting in the hollow deep. All systems appear offline. No life signs detected. Requesting orders. There was a pause on the other end of the transmission, long enough that Threx wondered if the signal had been lost. Then Korash's voice returned, sharp with interest. The Widow's Veil. I know this ship. It killed my brother's entire strike group at the Battle of Corin's Gate 3 years ago. If it is truly dead, I want it. Bring it in for salvage and study. Our engineers have wanted to examine human dreadnought technology for years, and this may be our best chance. Understood, Admiral. Shall I send a full salvage team, or begin with a smaller boarding party? Begin small, Korash said. Send a boarding party to confirm the ship is truly abandoned, and to assess its condition. If it is safe, I will dispatch additional resources to tow it back to our shipyards at Koresh Station. Yes, Admiral. The call ended, and Threx turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral. Prepare a boarding team. I want 6 of our best soldiers, plus 2 engineers to assess the ship's systems. Standard caution protocols. This ship has a reputation, and I do not intend to underestimate it, even in death. Some of his crew exchanged glances at this. To many of the younger Kryzen soldiers, the idea of an old, powerless wreck posing any danger seemed unlikely, almost superstitious. But Threx had survived this war longer than most, and he had learned that humans rarely did anything without a reason, even when that reason was not immediately obvious. The boarding team assembled in the shuttle bay within the hour. Their leader was a battle-hardened soldier named Grask Ilman, a Kryzen with a scarred face and a reputation for careful, methodical work. He had led over a dozen boarding operations during the war, some against human ships, some against pirate vessels, and he did not intend to let his guard down, simply because the sensors read the ship as dead. Listen up, Grask said to his team, as they checked their weapons and armor. Sensors say this ship is dead, but sensors have been wrong before. We go in slow, we go in careful. Weapons ready at all times. If anyone finds anything strange, anything at all, you report it immediately. Understood? The team nodded. There were 6 soldiers in heavy combat armor, and 2 engineers in lighter suits, carrying diagnostic equipment instead of weapons. Together they boarded a small shuttle and launched from the Vantar's Eye, crossing the gap between the scout ship and the massive derelict. As they approached, the sheer size of the Widow's Veil became more apparent. Up close, it looked less like a wreck and more like a sleeping giant. Its hull, though scarred, was still an impressive sight. 3 kilometers of dark gray metal, covered in weapon emplacements, sensor arrays, and the countless small details of a warship built for serious combat. The shuttle pilot guided them toward a breach in the hull near the ship's midsection, a jagged hole roughly 10 meters across, clearly caused by a heavy weapon strike during whatever battle had crippled the vessel. This will be our entry point, Grask said. Everyone stay close. Lights on. Move in pairs. The shuttle docked carefully against the breach, and the boarding team stepped out into the darkness of the human warship. The corridor beyond the breach was silent, cold, and completely without power. Their armor lights cut through the blackness, revealing scorched walls, twisted metal, and the eerie stillness of a ship with no life aboard. Grask took point, moving cautiously down the corridor, his weapon raised. Behind him came the rest of his team, spreading out in a loose formation, checking side corridors and doorways as they passed. The two engineers followed at the rear, their diagnostic tools already scanning for any active systems. "No power in this section," one of the engineers reported. "Emergency systems are completely drained. This ship has been dead a long time." They continued deeper into the ship, passing through what appeared to be a cargo hold, its contents either destroyed or long since removed. The air, filtered through their suits, carried no scent, but the visual evidence of the battle that had crippled this ship was everywhere. Blast marks on the walls, melted metal. In one room, they found the remains of what had clearly been a fierce firefight. Bullet holes and energy scoring covering every surface. "Looks like they fought hard here," one of the soldiers murmured. "Wonder what they were fighting." "Boarders probably," Grask said, "or each other, if things got desperate enough." They pressed on, moving through the silent ship, level by level. They found no bodies, which struck several members of the team as strange. If the crew had died defending the ship, where were the remains? If they had evacuated, why did so much of the ship show signs of a battle fought after the escape pods had launched? "Grask," one of the engineers called out. "You should see this." The engineer had found a small chamber, sealed behind a heavy door that had been forced open, likely by whatever crew member had last passed through it. Inside were rows of empty lockers, their contents removed, and on the far wall, scratched into the metal, were words in the human language. Grask's suit translated them automatically. "We held the line," the message read. "God help whoever finds this ship next." The soldiers stood in silence for a moment, looking at the message. It was the kind of thing that might have unsettled a less experienced crew, but Grask simply nodded and moved on. "Keep moving," he said. "We need to reach the bridge and the reactor core. The Admiral wants a full assessment." They continued their exploration for nearly 2 hours, moving through engineering sections, crew quarters, and weapons control rooms, all of them dark, cold, and silent. Everywhere they went, they found more evidence of the battle that had crippled this ship, but no bodies, no survivors, and no active systems of any kind. By every measure, the Widow's Veil appeared to be exactly what it seemed. A dead ship, drifting alone in the dark, its crew long gone. What none of them noticed, in all their careful searching, was a small, nearly invisible sensor node, hidden in the ceiling of nearly every corridor they passed through. Nor did they notice that, deep within the ship's core, far below the levels they explored, a single status light blinked steadily in the darkness, counting, waiting, recording every word they spoke and every step they took. The Widow's Veil was not dead. It was listening. Grask's team eventually reached what appeared to be a secondary bridge, a smaller command center located deep within the ship's armored core. Unlike the rest of the vessel, this section showed almost no battle damage. Its walls were clean, its consoles intact, though completely without power. "This is strange," one of the engineers said, running a scanner over the room. "This entire section has redundant power conduits, shielding rated far beyond standard bridge protection, and reinforced walls nearly twice as thick as anywhere else on the ship. Why would they build a secondary bridge this heavily protected?" Grask looked around the room slowly. Something about it bothered him, though he could not say exactly what. The chairs were positioned, as if crew had left them recently, not weeks ago. There was no dust, no debris, nothing to suggest this room had been abandoned for months. "Get your readings and let's move," he said. "I do not like this room." "Superstition, Grask?" one of the soldiers asked, half joking. "Call it experience," Grask replied. "This war has taught me that when something feels wrong, it usually is." They finished their scans and began making their way back toward the shuttle, their mission report already forming in Grask's mind. The ship was dead, its systems drained, its crew missing or dead, its hull heavily damaged but structurally sound enough to be towed for salvage. It was, by every measure, exactly the prize that Admiral Korash Belton had hoped for. But as they walked back through the silent corridors, none of them noticed the faint hum, so quiet it was almost imperceptible, coming from somewhere deep within the ship's belly. A single system, isolated from the rest of the vessel's power grid, drawing the smallest possible trickle of energy from a hidden reserve battery, designed for exactly this purpose. It was not enough power to register on Kryzen sensors. It was not enough power to activate lights or life support or any system that might give away its presence. It was enough power to keep one thing alive, a countdown, ticking steadily toward zero. waiting for the right moment and the right number of enemy ships to reveal what the Widow's Veil truly was. Grask's team returned to the Vantar's Eye and delivered their report to Commander Threx, who relayed it immediately to Admiral Korash. The report was thorough, detailed, and completely convincing. The ship was dead. The ship was safe. The ship was theirs for the taking. Admiral Korash Beltan, aboard the Ashen Talon, received the report with great satisfaction. He immediately began issuing orders, redirecting additional forces toward the Hollow Deep to assist with the salvage operation. Within hours, 3 additional Kryzen warships had been assigned to the recovery effort, along with a heavy tug vessel capable of moving even a ship as massive as the Widow's Veil. None of them knew that they were walking directly into the largest trap the Terran Defense Fleet had ever set. Somewhere, far beyond the Hollow Deep, in a hidden communication relay station, a human officer watched a status display update with a single new line of text. Kryzen salvage operation confirmed. Additional forces en route. Estimated arrival, 18 hours. The officer allowed herself a small, grim smile before sending a single encrypted message back toward Terran Command. The bait has been taken, the message read. Prepare the reserve fleet. The trap, 11 years in the planning, 8 weeks in the execution, was finally closing. 18 hours passed slowly for the crew of the Vantar's Eye as they waited near the drifting hulk of the Widow's Veil. Commander Threx Kadomi spent most of that time reviewing the boarding team's reports again and again, looking for anything that might have been missed. He was a careful officer, and something about this recovery, despite all the evidence pointing to a simple dead ship, continued to bother him. He was not alone in this feeling. Grask Ilman, the soldier who had led the boarding team, requested a private meeting with Threx before the additional Kryzen ships arrived. "Commander," Grask said, standing at attention in Threx's small office aboard the scout ship, "I want to raise a concern, even though I know it may sound foolish." "Speak freely," Threx said. "I have learned that the soldiers who raise concerns are usually the ones who survive the longest." Grask nodded, appreciating the permission. "The secondary bridge we found, deep in the ship's core. It did not match the rest of the vessel. No damage, no dust. Reinforced walls far beyond anything I have seen on a human ship before. It felt prepared, Commander, not abandoned." "Prepared for what?" "I do not know. But 11 years of fighting humans has taught me that they do not build things without a purpose. If that room was built to survive heavy damage, then perhaps it was built to protect something important. Or someone." Threx considered this carefully. "Your engineers found no active power in that section." "They found no power that our sensors could detect," Grask corrected. "That is not the same thing as no power at all. Human technology has surprised us before." Threx was quiet for a long moment, staring at the report on his desk. He had commanded ships against the humans for over a decade, and he had seen many things that defied easy explanation. Ships that should have been destroyed but somehow survived. Fleets that should have won easily but suffered devastating losses instead. He respected Grask's instincts, because his own instincts told him something similar. But instincts were not proof, and Admiral Korash Beltan was not a patient officer. "I will pass your concerns along to the Admiral," Threx said. "But understand, Grask, the Admiral wants this ship, and he wants it badly. His brother died fighting this very vessel. He will not easily accept caution as a reason for delay." "I understand, Commander. I simply wanted it on record." "Noted. And Grask, good instincts. Keep them sharp." Threx sent a message to Admiral Korash relaying Grask's concerns, but as predicted, the Admiral's response was brief and dismissive. The reinforced room was likely a command bunker, built to protect senior officers during battle, nothing more. The lack of power readings confirmed the ship was dead. The salvage operation would proceed as planned. Threx accepted the order, as he was required to, but he did not fully let go of his unease. He ordered the Vantar's Eye to maintain a defensive posture at the edge of the debris field, sensors active, weapons ready, even as the salvage operation began in earnest. The additional Kryzen ships arrived exactly on schedule. 3 warships, the Iron Fang, the Vex Kalor, and the Bloodmark, along with the heavy tug vessel Koresh Hauler, entered the Hollow Deep and took up positions around the derelict Widow's Veil. Admiral Korash himself arrived several hours later aboard the Ashen Talon, eager to personally oversee the recovery of the ship that had haunted his family for 3 years. "Show me everything," Korash said, as he reviewed the sensor data and boarding reports on the Ashen Talon's main display. "I want to know every detail of this vessel before we bring it home." His chief engineer, a methodical Kryzan named Vesa Thorn, walked him through the findings. "The hull is heavily damaged but structurally intact, Admiral. Approximately 60% of the ship's weapon systems appear destroyed or non-functional. The reactor core is cold, drained completely of power reserves. Life support has been offline for weeks. By every measure, this ship is dead." "And the reinforced room the boarding team found?" "Likely a secondary command center or armored bunker, Admiral. Human ships of this class sometimes include such rooms for senior officers to retreat to during boarding actions. It shows no signs of unusual activity." Korash nodded, satisfied. "Good. Begin preparations to tow the ship back to Koresh Station. I want a full engineering team assigned to study its systems the moment we arrive. This ship killed too many good Kryzan soldiers for us to simply destroy it. We will learn everything it has to teach us, and then we will dismantle it piece by piece." The order was given, and the Koresh hauler began the slow, careful process of attaching tow cables to the massive derelict. It was delicate work, given the ship's size and the damage to its hull, but the Kryzan engineers were skilled, and within a few hours, the tow cables were secure. As this work continued, Admiral Korash ordered a second, larger boarding team to return to the Widow's Vale, this time accompanied by a full team of engineers tasked with a much more thorough investigation of the ship's systems, particularly its reactor core and weapons control systems. He wanted a complete technical assessment before the ship even reached Koresh Station. This second boarding team was led by Vesa Thorn herself, accompanied by a dozen soldiers for protection, and 8 engineers carrying advanced diagnostic equipment. Grask Ilman was assigned to lead the security detail once again, a decision made partly because of his familiarity with the ship's layout, and partly because Threx had quietly requested it, still trusting his soldiers' instincts more than he trusted the Admiral's confidence. The team descended into the Widow's Vale once more, this time heading directly for the ship's reactor core, located deep within its heavily armored midsection. The corridors were just as dark and silent as before, though this time the team moved with the confidence of soldiers who had already mapped much of the ship's layout. "Systems all still dark," one of the engineers reported as they walked. "No change from the initial survey." They reached the reactor core after nearly an hour of careful movement through the ship's lower decks. The core itself was a massive cylindrical structure, 3 stories tall, surrounded by a maze of pipes, conduits, and control panels. Even powered down, it was an impressive piece of engineering, and the Kryzan engineers immediately set to work analyzing its design. "Fascinating," Vesa Thorn murmured, running her scanner over the reactor's outer casing. "This design is far more advanced than our intelligence reports suggested. The containment field generators alone are nearly twice as efficient as our own designs. If we can replicate this technology, it would represent a significant advantage for the Ascendancy." "Careful, Chief Engineer," Grask said, standing watch nearby with his weapon ready. "Nothing about this ship has been what it first appeared." "Your caution is noted, soldier," Vesa said, though not unkindly. "But this is precisely why the Admiral sent me. I intend to be thorough." As the engineers continued their work, cataloging the reactor's design, and beginning the delicate process of extracting data from its dormant control systems, Grask found himself once again drawn back toward the reinforced secondary bridge he had discovered on the first expedition. Something about that room still nagged at him, and with the engineers occupied, he decided to take 2 of his soldiers and investigate it further. "Stay alert," he told his men, as they made their way through the connecting corridors. "We're going back to that armored room." They found the room exactly as they had left it, undisturbed, unnaturally clean, its consoles dark and silent. Grask walked slowly through the space, studying every detail, running his hand along the reinforced walls, examining the chairs positioned at each console. "What are we looking for, sir?" one of his soldiers asked. "I don't know," Grask admitted. "Something, anything, that doesn't fit." It was then that one of his soldiers, a sharp-eyed young Kryzan named Petra Voss, noticed something odd about one of the consoles near the back of the room. Unlike the others, which were completely dark, this one had a single, nearly invisible light, dim and steady, glowing faintly beneath a thin layer of dust. "Sir," Petra said quietly, "over here." Grask moved to the console and examined the light closely. It was small, easy to miss, unless you were looking directly at it, and it pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat. "That's a power indicator," Grask said, his voice tight. "This console is active." He immediately called for one of the engineers to come examine the finding, and within minutes, Vessa Thorne herself arrived to investigate. She ran her scanner over the console carefully, her expression shifting from curiosity to genuine concern. "This is drawing power from an isolated source," she said slowly. "A battery system completely separate from the main reactor, likely designed specifically to survive a total power failure elsewhere on the ship. I have never seen anything like this in human technology before." "What does it do?" Grask asked. "I don't know," Vessa admitted. "The system is heavily encrypted, and I do not want to attempt direct access without proper preparation. It could be a simple data recorder. It could be something else entirely." Grask felt a chill run through him, despite the climate control in his suit. "Chief Engineer, I recommend we report this to the Admiral immediately, and I recommend extreme caution before anyone attempts to interact with that system further." Vessa nodded slowly. "Agreed. I will inform Admiral Korash at once." The report reached Admiral Korash within the hour, and for the first time since the discovery of the Widow's Veil, a flicker of genuine concern crossed his features. He had commanded this operation with total confidence, certain that the ship was nothing more than a dead hulk waiting to be claimed. Now, a single blinking light threatened to unravel that certainty. "What is your assessment, Chief Engineer?" Korash asked, his voice carrying over the comm system to the boarding team. "Admiral, the system appears to be an isolated low-power device, likely a backup data recorder or emergency beacon. It does not appear connected to the ship's main systems, weapons, or reactor. I do not believe it poses an immediate threat, but I recommend we exercise caution and continue monitoring it before proceeding with the tow operation." Korash considered this for a long moment. Around him, on the Ashen Talon's bridge, his officers waited silently for his decision. He thought of his brother, killed years ago by this very ship, and he thought of the technological advantage that studying its systems could provide to the entire Kryzen ascendancy. The prize was too valuable to abandon over a single blinking light. "Continue the operation," he said finally, "but increase monitoring on that system. If it shows any change in behavior, any increase in power draw, any sign of activity beyond its current state, I want to know immediately." "Understood, Admiral." What none of them realized, in that moment, was that the blinking light Petra Voss had discovered was never meant to remain hidden forever. It was a deliberate design, a small piece of psychological engineering, built into the Widow's Veil by its creators. The human engineers who designed this ship, and the crew who had prepared it for its final mission, understood something about their enemy. That curiosity, once triggered, was difficult to resist. A single visible light, easy enough to find if searched for carefully, but subtle enough not to seem obviously dangerous, was the perfect way to keep Kryzen attention focused, keep them investigating, keep them close. Because the longer the Kryzen fleet remained gathered around the Widow's Veil, cataloging its systems, extracting its secrets, congratulating themselves on their prize, the more ships would arrive to join the salvage operation. And the more ships that arrived, the greater the reward would be when the trap finally closed. Deep within the ship's hidden core, far below even the reinforced secondary bridge, the countdown continued, patient and silent, drawing closer to zero with every passing hour. It did not care about the blinking light the Kryzen had found. That light was a distraction, nothing more. A small piece of theater, designed to hold their attention while the true system, hidden far more carefully, continued its work undisturbed. The tow operation proceeded through the following day. The Koresh hauler, straining against the massive weight of the Widow's Veil, began the slow process of pulling the derelict warship out of the debris field and onto a course toward Koresh Station, 3 days away at standard towing speed. The remaining Kryzen warships, the Iron Fang, the Vex Kalor, the Bloodmark, and the Ashen Talon itself, formed an escort formation around the derelict, ensuring its safe passage. Admiral Korash, satisfied with the progress of the operation, sent word back to Kryzen High Command, reporting the successful capture of the legendary human warship, Widow's Veil. The news spread quickly through Kryzen military channels, celebrated as a significant victory, a symbol that the tide of the long war was finally turning in the Ascendancy's favor. More ships began arriving to observe the historic capture, drawn by curiosity and pride. Within 2 days, the escort fleet around the Widow's Veil had grown from 4 warships to 11, along with numerous smaller support vessels, supply ships, and even a few civilian observation craft carrying Kryzen journalists eager to document the moment. Threx Kadomi watched this growing gathering from the bridge of the Vantar's Eye with a growing sense of unease. 11 warships, dozens of smaller vessels, all gathered in one place, all focused on a single derelict ship that continued to draw more attention with every passing hour. "Grask," Threx said quietly, calling his trusted soldier to the bridge. "Does this feel right to you?" Grask studied the tactical display, showing the growing fleet surrounding the Widow's Veil, and felt the same cold unease that had been building in him since he first found that reinforced room deep in the ship's core. "No, Commander," he said. "It does not feel right at all." Neither of them could have known just how correct their instincts were, nor could they have known that, at that very moment, a hidden countdown deep within the Widow's Veil had finally reached its final stage, waiting only for one last condition to be met, before it would trigger the largest single ambush in the history of the human Kryzen War. That condition was simple: enough enemy ships, gathered close enough together, for the trap to inflict maximum damage when it finally sprung. And with each passing hour, that condition drew closer to being fulfilled. 3 days after the Widow's Veil was first discovered, the gathering around it had grown into something far larger than a simple salvage operation. What had begun as a single scout ship investigating a derelict had become a full fleet muster, with Kryzen warships arriving from 3 different systems to witness what military command was now calling one of the greatest technological victories of the war. Admiral Korash Beltan stood on the bridge of the Ashen Talon, watching the tactical display with quiet pride. 23 ships now surrounded the derelict human dreadnought, ranging from heavy warships to supply vessels to the civilian observation craft that continued to arrive, carrying journalists and officials eager to be present for this historic moment. The image of Kryzen's strength claiming the wreck of a ship that had haunted their nightmares for years was, to Korash, worth every bit of the attention it was receiving. "Admiral," said his communications officer, "Fleet Command sends congratulations, along with a request. They wish to send a delegation of senior military officials to personally inspect the Widow's Veil before it reaches Koresh Station. They believe this capture deserves to be documented for the historical record." Korash allowed himself a rare smile. "Approve the request. Let them come. Let the entire Ascendancy see what we have accomplished here." Threx Kadomi, watching this exchange from his position aboard the Vantar's Eye, felt his unease deepen with every new ship that arrived. He had voiced his concerns twice more since the discovery of the hidden power source, and twice more he had been politely dismissed. The Admiral was not a foolish officer, but he was a proud one, and pride had a way of making even careful commanders overlook warning signs that seemed obvious in hindsight. Meanwhile, deep within the Widow's Veil, Vesa Thorne and her engineering team continued their careful investigation of the mysterious active console. After 2 days of careful, methodical work, they had finally managed to decrypt a small portion of its data, enough to reveal something that both excited and troubled them. "Admiral," Vesa reported during a status update, "we have identified the purpose of the active system in the secondary bridge. It appears to be a life support monitoring station, connected to a series of cryogenic stasis pods, located in a hidden compartment beneath the ship's main crew quarters." This news sent a ripple of surprise through the command staff listening to the report. "Stasis pods?" Korash asked. "Are you saying there may be surviving human crew aboard this vessel?" "It is possible, Admiral. The readings suggest at least a dozen pods, though we have not yet been able to access the compartment itself to confirm. If there are survivors, they would be in deep cryogenic sleep, likely unaware of anything happening around them." Korash considered this new information carefully. Captured human crew, especially officers from a ship as significant as the Widow's Veil, would be an intelligence prize almost as valuable as the ship itself. Interrogation of surviving crew members could reveal secrets about human military strategy, technology, and command structure that no amount of studying dead machinery could provide. "Locate this hidden compartment," Korash ordered. "I want those stasis pods recovered intact, and I want it done carefully." If there are living humans aboard, I want them alive when we bring them home. Vessa's team redoubled their efforts, working through the ship's schematics and cross-referencing them with the data they had extracted from the active console. It took nearly 6 more hours, but eventually, they located what they believed to be the entrance to the hidden compartment, a section of wall in the ship's lower crew quarters that showed subtle signs of being a concealed door. Grask-Ilmun, still leading the security detail for the boarding operation, stood watch as the engineers prepared to open the hidden compartment. His instincts, sharpened by years of dangerous missions, told him that something about this discovery felt too convenient, too easily found after days of careful searching. But orders were orders, and the Admiral wanted answers. "Ready when you are, Chief Engineer," Grask said, his weapon raised and his soldiers positioned around the concealed doorway. Vessa worked carefully at the mechanism, using tools designed to bypass human locking systems without triggering any potential security measures. After several tense minutes, there was a soft mechanical click, and the section of wall slid open, revealing a narrow corridor beyond. The corridor led to a small chamber, dimly lit by the same emergency battery system that powered the active console they had discovered earlier. Inside, arranged in 2 neat rows, were 12 cryogenic stasis pods, each one dark and silent, their occupants visible through small viewing windows on each pod's surface. Grask stepped forward cautiously, looking through the viewing window of the nearest pod. Inside, he could see the face of a human, pale and still, clearly deep in cryogenic sleep. The pod's monitoring display, though dim, showed steady vital signs. Whoever this human was, they were alive. "Chief Engineer," Grask said quietly, "confirm human vital signs in these pods?" Vessa ran her scanner over the nearest pod carefully. Confirmed. Weak but stable vital signs. This individual is alive, though deeply sedated. The same appears true for the others. A murmur of excitement passed through the boarding team. Living human prisoners, 12 of them, likely including officers from one of the most notorious ships in the Terran Defense Fleet, represented an enormous intelligence opportunity. Vessa immediately relayed the discovery to Admiral Korash, who received the news with barely contained excitement. "Excellent work, Chief Engineer," Korash said. "Prepare those pods for careful extraction. I want them transported to the Ashen Talon's medical facility immediately, where our specialists can begin reviving them under controlled conditions. Handle them with care. Living prisoners are far more valuable than dead ones." The order was given, and additional engineering teams were sent to assist with the delicate work of safely disconnecting the stasis pods from the ship's systems and transporting them to the waiting shuttles. It was slow, careful work, and it took the better part of another full day to complete. What none of the Kryzen forces realized, as they carefully extracted the 12 stasis pods and celebrated their unexpected prize, was that these pods contained something other than what they believed. The individuals inside were not command officers or high-value intelligence targets. They were, in fact, decoys, carefully prepared bodies, placed in genuine cryogenic pods, kept alive through automated systems, but containing no useful information whatsoever. Ordinary crew members who had volunteered for this final mission, understanding fully that their role was simply to be found, to be a convincing enough discovery to keep the Kryzen fleet occupied, curious, and most importantly, gathered together in one place. The real crew of the Widow's Veil, along with its true purpose, remained hidden far deeper within the ship, protected by systems far more sophisticated than anything the Kryzen engineers had yet discovered. While the Kryzen forces celebrated their discovery of the stasis pods, events far beyond the hollow deep were moving into their final position. 3 days earlier, at the moment the Widow's Veil had first been discovered by the scout ship Vantar's Eye, a coded message had been transmitted through a series of hidden relay stations scattered throughout human-controlled space. That message had reached Terran Defense Fleet Command within hours, triggering a plan that had been in preparation for nearly 2 months. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding officer of the 3rd Terran Battle Fleet, had been waiting for this exact signal. Her fleet, consisting of 18 warships, including 3 additional Dreadnought-class vessels, had spent the past 2 months hiding in a nebula cluster nearly 2 light-years from the hollow deep, running silent, powered down as much as possible, waiting for the moment when enough Kryzen ships had gathered around the bait to make the trap worthwhile. "Confirmation received," her communications officer reported. Kryzen fleet strength around the Widow's Veil now stands at 23 vessels and continuing to grow. Estimated arrival of additional forces within the next 12 hours. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display showing the growing Kryzen presence in the hollow deep. 23 ships was already more than she had hoped for when this plan was first conceived. If even more continued to arrive, the trap would deliver a blow to the Kryzen Ascendancy's military strength, unlike anything seen in this war. How long until the Widow's Veil's automated systems reach full activation? She asked. According to the mission timeline, the ship's core systems will complete their final activation sequence in approximately 14 hours. Admiral. The exact trigger depends on continued proximity of enemy vessels, but current conditions suggest activation is highly likely within that window. And our fleet's position? We can reach attack range within 10 hours, at maximum safe speed, Admiral, arriving with a 4-hour buffer before the projected activation window. Admiral Chen nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the decision before her. This plan had cost a great deal to prepare. The Widow's Veil itself, though heavily damaged in its final battle months earlier, had been deliberately preserved rather than scuttled, refitted in secret with hidden systems, and disguised as a lifeless derelict. 12 volunteers had willingly entered cryogenic stasis, understanding they might not survive if anything went wrong. And an entire battle fleet had spent 2 months hiding in the dark, waiting patiently for this exact moment. Set course for the hollow deep, she ordered. Maximum stealth protocols. I want us in position, and ready to strike the moment the Widow's Veil activates. We give the Kryzen fleet no chance to escape. Her fleet, silent and hidden, began its slow, careful approach toward the hollow deep, timed precisely to arrive at the exact moment the trap would spring. Every ship maintained strict radio silence, minimal power signatures, and careful navigation to avoid any chance of early detection. Back in the hollow deep, unaware of the approaching human fleet, Admiral Korash Beltan continued to celebrate his growing collection of prizes. The 12 stasis pods had been successfully transported to the Ashen Talon, where medical teams were already preparing the careful process of reviving the first prisoner. More ships continued to arrive throughout the day, drawn by news of the historic capture, until the gathered Kryzen fleet numbered 29 vessels, the largest single gathering of Ascendancy warships in this sector of space in over a year. Vesa Thorne's engineering team, meanwhile, continued their investigation of the Widow's Veil's remaining systems, pushing deeper into its network in search of additional secrets. It was during this continued work that they made a discovery that, had it come even a few hours earlier, might have changed everything that followed. Admiral, Vesa reported, her voice carrying a note of concern that had not been present in her earlier updates. We have found something troubling in the ship's secondary systems. There appears to be a hidden network of power conduits running throughout the vessel, far more extensive than anything visible in our initial scans. These conduits connect to areas of the ship we have not yet explored, including what appear to be the weapon bay control systems. Korash frowned at this news. Are the weapons active? I do not believe so, Admiral. The power readings remain extremely low, consistent with a passive monitoring system rather than an active weapons platform. However, I recommend increased caution. This ship's true systems appear far more extensive than our initial assessment suggested. Understood. Increase monitoring on all power systems. Report any change immediately. Yes, Admiral. But even as Vesa gave this order to her team, the countdown hidden deep within the Widow's Veil's true core continued its final approach toward zero, undetected by even the most careful Kryzen scans. The passive power readings Vesa had detected were, in truth, the very last stage of a process that had been running silently since the moment the first Kryzen boarding team had set foot on the ship days earlier. Every hour that passed, every additional ship that arrived, every careful scan and investigation the Kryzen engineers performed, had been feeding data into a system designed to calculate the exact optimal moment to strike. That moment was now less than 6 hours away. Threx Kadomi, watching the growing fleet from the Vantar's eye, could not shake the feeling that something terrible was approaching. He had served in this war long enough to trust his instincts, even when he could not explain them with hard evidence. He requested one final meeting with Admiral Korash, determined to voice his concerns one last time, before it was too late. Admiral, Threx said, his voice carrying over the secure comm channel, I understand the value of what we have found here. But I must formally request that we consider reducing our fleet presence in this system. 29 ships gathered in one location represents an enormous concentration of force, vulnerable to any coordinated attack, whether from this ship's hidden systems or from an external threat we have not yet detected. Korash's response was patient but firm. Commander Threx, your caution has been noted throughout this operation, and I respect the instincts that have kept you alive this long. But we have thoroughly investigated this vessel. Its weapons are damaged beyond function. Its reactor is cold. Whatever hidden systems remain are minor, passive, and pose no credible threat. I understand your concern, but I do not share it. We remain in position until the tow operation to Koresh Station is complete. Understood, Admiral, Threx said, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. He ended the transmission and stood alone on the bridge of the Vantar's Eye, staring at the tactical display showing the massive gathering of Kryzen ships surrounding the silent, patient hulk of the Widow's Veil. Somewhere deep within that ship, he was certain, something was waiting. Something patient. Something that understood, better than any of them realized, exactly how many ships it would take to make this moment worthwhile. He did not know it yet, but he was right to be afraid. The countdown continued, silent and unstoppable, drawing closer with every passing minute toward the moment when the Widow's Veil would finally reveal the true reason it had been left drifting in the hollow deep, waiting patiently for exactly this kind of opportunity. The final hours before the trap sprung passed with deceptive calm across the Kryzen fleet. Admiral Korash Beltan spent most of that time in the Ashen Talon's medical bay, watching as his physicians began the delicate process of reviving the first human prisoner from cryogenic sleep. It was slow work, requiring careful monitoring of vital signs and gradual warming of the body, but Korash was patient. He had waited 3 years for a chance to strike back at the ship that killed his brother. He could wait a few more hours to learn its secrets from the mouths of its own crew. Meanwhile, Vesa Thorne's engineering team continued their careful mapping of the hidden power network they had discovered, running through the Widow's Veil. With each passing hour, they identified more connections, more hidden systems, more evidence that this ship had been far more heavily modified than any standard dreadnought design. What they did not know, and could not have known, even with their most careful scans, was that every single measurement they took, every system they mapped, was itself being monitored by the very network they were studying. The Widow's Veil was not simply hiding its secrets, it was watching everyone who searched for them. Deep within the ship's true core, buried beneath layers of shielding that no Kryzen scanner had yet penetrated, a system that the human engineers who built it had simply called the Watchman, completed its final calculations. It had been counting ships since the moment the first Kryzen scout arrived. It had been tracking positions, distances, and formations with perfect precision. It had been waiting, patiently, for the exact combination of conditions that its creators had specified months earlier, before the Widow's Veil was ever left drifting in the hollow deep as bait. Those conditions had finally been met. 29 Kryzen warships, gathered in tight formation around a single point in space, none of them at combat readiness, all of them believing themselves safe from a ship they were certain was dead. The Watchman began its activation sequence. Aboard the Vantar's Eye, Commander Threx Kadomi felt it before his sensors registered it, a strange, indefinable sense of wrongness that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up, despite his species' different biology, producing no such reaction naturally. He turned to his sensor station just as the first alert began to sound. "Commander," Desik Vor called out, his 4 eyes wide with alarm. "Power signature detected aboard the Widow's Veil. Massive spike, originating from deep within the ship's core." "Show me," Threx demanded, already moving toward the tactical display. What he saw made his blood run cold. The power readings from the derelict ship, which had remained near zero for 3 full days, were now climbing at an impossible rate, doubling every few seconds as system after system across the massive vessel roared to life simultaneously. "All ships, this is Vantar's Eye," Threx shouted into the fleet-wide communication channel. "The Widow's Veil is active. Repeat, the Widow's Veil is active. All ships, prepare for—" He never finished the sentence. Across the entire 3-kilometer length of the Widow's Veil, hundreds of missile bay doors, hidden beneath camouflaged hull plating that had fooled every Kryzen scan for 3 days, slammed open simultaneously. It was not a gradual process. It was not a slow reveal. In the space of a single second, the ship that had appeared dead, damaged, and harmless transformed into what it had truly been all along, the most heavily armed vessel ever constructed by human hands, and it opened every single missile bay at once. The reactor core, which Kryzen engineers had confirmed as cold and drained just hours earlier, had in truth never been the ship's true power source at all. It had been a decoy, a carefully maintained illusion, designed to convince exactly the kind of thorough investigation the Kryzen had performed. The Widow's Veil's actual power came from a series of independent fusion cells, hidden throughout the ship's hull in compartments so well shielded that even direct scanning had failed to detect them, storing enough energy to power every weapon system simultaneously for one devastating strike. Missiles poured out of the Widow's Veil in numbers that defied belief. Hundreds of them, then thousands, streaking outward in every direction, their targeting systems already locked onto every Kryzen vessel within range, before the first weapon had even cleared its bay. The sheer volume of the launch overwhelmed sensor systems across the entire Kryzen fleet, creating a wall of contacts so dense that point defense computers struggled to process targets fast enough to respond. Aboard the Ashen Talon, Admiral Korash Belton felt the ship lurch beneath him as alarms began blaring across every deck. "Report," he shouted, rushing from the medical bay toward the bridge. "Admiral, we are under massive missile attack," his tactical officer shouted back, barely able to keep pace with the incoming data. "Origin point is the Widow's Veil itself. I am reading thousands of individual contacts, spread across the entire fleet formation. Point defense systems are overwhelmed." "That is impossible," Korash said, though even as he spoke the words, he could see the proof on the tactical display before him, a wall of red contacts spreading outward from the ship they had believed dead, converging on every vessel in his fleet with terrifying speed. The Iron Fang was the first ship to die. Struck by no fewer than 40 missiles in the span of 3 seconds, its shields collapsed almost instantly under the concentrated barrage, and its hull breached in a dozen places simultaneously. The resulting chain of internal explosions tore the warship apart from within, scattering debris across a wide arc of space as its reactor core detonated in a brilliant flash of light. The Vex Kalor and the Bloodmark suffered similar fates within moments of each other, their point defense systems firing desperately, but hopelessly outmatched by the sheer volume of incoming missiles. Ship after ship across the Kryzen formation found itself under attack from every direction at once, unable to retreat, unable to maneuver effectively in the tight formation they had maintained for days around their prize. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Korash shouted, though he could hear in his own voice how useless the order sounded even as he gave it. 29 ships, gathered so closely together for days of salvage operations, had no room to maneuver, no time to spread out, no way to escape the storm of missiles now converging on their position from every angle. Threx Kadomi, aboard the Vantar's Eye, watched the destruction unfold with a horror that went beyond simple fear. He had suspected something was wrong. He had voiced his concerns repeatedly, and now he was watching those fears made real in the worst possible way, as ship after ship in the Kryzen fleet died around him. "Evasive action," he shouted to his own crew. "Full power to engines. Get us clear of this kill zone now." The Vantar's Eye, smaller and more maneuverable than the larger warships, managed to break away from the densest concentration of the missile barrage, but even it could not escape entirely unscathed. 3 missiles struck the scout ship's aft section, sending violent shudders through the hull and knocking out its rear shield generators, but the ship survived, limping away from the main battle as Threx desperately tried to organize a coordinated retreat for whatever remained of his fleet. Aboard the Widow's Veil, as the first wave of missiles struck home, a second phase of the ship's true purpose began to activate. Deep within the ship's hull, sections of armor plating that had appeared damaged and destroyed throughout the Kryzen boarding operations began to shift and reconfigure, revealing weapon turrets that had been deliberately disguised as wreckage. The ship's main batteries, dozens of heavy energy cannons that Kryzen scans had confirmed as non-functional, roared to life, adding their fire to the devastating missile barrage already tearing through the Kryzen formation. And it was at this exact moment, as the Kryzen fleet reeled from the sudden, impossible attack from a ship they had believed dead, that Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen's 3rd Terran battle fleet arrived. 18 human warships dropped out of stealth formation at the edge of the hollow deep, their weapons already charged, their targeting systems already locked onto the chaotic, disorganized remnants of the Kryzen fleet. The timing was perfect, planned down to the minute, arriving at the exact moment when the Widow's Veil's opening barrage had already crippled or destroyed a third of the Kryzen ships present, and the survivors were too disorganized, too scattered, and too shocked to mount any coordinated defense. "All ships, engage," Admiral Chen ordered from the bridge of her flagship, the UNS Second Chance. "Target every vessel showing weapons capability first, then move to disabled ships for boarding, and capture where possible. Let's finish what the Widow's Veil started." The human fleet swept into the battle like a hammer falling on an anvil, their weapons tearing into the already devastated Kryzen formation with brutal efficiency. Ships that had survived the initial missile barrage now found themselves caught between the continuing fire from the Widow's Veil and the fresh, coordinated assault of Admiral Chen's battle fleet. Aboard the Ashen Talon, Admiral Korash watched his fleet disintegrate around him with a growing sense of despair. "Status report," he demanded. "Admiral, we have lost contact with 11 vessels," his tactical officer reported, his voice shaking. "The Iron Fang, Vex Kalor, and Bloodmark are confirmed destroyed. 6 additional ships are reporting critical damage. We are now under attack from a second human fleet, 18 vessels, approaching from the outer edge of the system." Korash stared at the tactical display, watching the neat blue icons representing his once proud fleet scatter and vanish one by one, replaced by expanding clouds of debris and drifting wreckage. In the span of less than 10 minutes, the greatest triumph of his military career had transformed into the worst disaster of the entire war. "This was never a dead ship," he said quietly, almost to himself. "This was never a salvage operation. This was a trap, from the very beginning." He thought of Threx Kadomi's repeated warnings, dismissed each time in favor of ambition and pride, and he understood, too late, that his caution had been justified all along. The reinforced secondary bridge, the hidden power source, the convenient discovery of the stasis pods. Every step of this operation had been carefully designed to keep his fleet gathered, curious, and vulnerable, exactly long enough for a second fleet to arrive and deliver the killing blow. "Admiral," his tactical officer said urgently, "the Ashen Talon has taken multiple hits to our shield generators. We are losing power across 3 decks. Recommend immediate withdrawal while we still have the capability." Korash looked around his bridge, at the flashing damage alerts, at the tactical display showing his fleet being systematically destroyed around him, and made the only decision left available to him. "All surviving ships, this is Admiral Korash Beltan," he transmitted across the fleet-wide channel, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. "Withdraw immediately, break formation, and retreat toward Kryzen space at maximum speed. This battle is lost." The order came too late for many of his ships. Of the 29 vessels that had gathered around the Widow's Veil to celebrate what they believed was a historic victory, only 9 managed to break free of the battle and begin their retreat, their hulls scarred and their crews shaken by the sudden, devastating reversal of fortune. 20 ships, representing thousands of Kryzen lives and years of military investment, were destroyed, disabled, or captured in the span of less than 30 minutes. Threx Kadomi, his own ship badly damaged but still functional, guided the Vantar's Eye away from the battle, alongside the handful of surviving Kryzen vessels, watching in his rear sensors as the human fleet finished mopping up the last pockets of resistance. He thought of his own warnings, given and ignored, and felt a bitter mixture of vindication and grief that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Behind them, the Widow's Veil continued to hang in space, its missile bays now empty, but its main weapons still active, standing guard over the field of destruction it had created. It had done exactly what it was built to do, exactly what its crew and creators had planned for months in advance, waiting patiently in the dark for the perfect moment to reveal its true purpose. The greatest trap of the human Kryzen War had closed exactly as planned, and the balance of the conflict had shifted in a single, devastating stroke. In the hours after the battle, the hollow deep looked nothing like the quiet, empty region of space it had been just days earlier. Wreckage from 20 destroyed or disabled Kryzen warships drifted across a wide stretch of the debris field, mixing with the older ruins that had first drawn the Vantar's eye to this location. Fires still burned in the vacuum-sealed compartments of several crippled vessels, slowly consuming what remained of their internal atmospheres. Escape pods dotted the space around the wreckage, carrying survivors who had managed to abandon their ships before the end. Admiral Sarah Chen's 3rd Terran battle fleet moved methodically through the aftermath, securing disabled Kryzen vessels, recovering survivors for processing, and confirming the destruction of ships too damaged to be salvaged. It was careful, exhausting work, but Chen insisted on doing it properly. This victory, the largest single engagement win the Terran Defense Fleet had achieved in the entire 11-year war, deserved to be handled with precision and discipline, not careless celebration. Aboard the Widow's Veil itself, the true crew finally emerged from the deepest, most heavily shielded section of the ship, a hidden command core that no Kryzen scan had ever detected, protected by layers of shielding and misdirection that had taken human engineers nearly a year to design and build. Captain Elena Reyes, commanding officer of the Widow's Veil, stepped onto her ship's true bridge for the first time in 3 days, having spent the entire operation hidden away with her core crew, watching the Kryzen investigation unfold through a network of hidden sensors, while the Watchman system managed the ship's disguise. "Status report," she said to her tactical officer, though she already knew from the sensor feeds what the answer would be. 20 Kryzen vessels destroyed or disabled, Captain. 9 escaped toward Kryzen space, though several are reporting heavy damage and may not survive the journey. Our own casualties are minimal. The decoy crew in the stasis pods are safe and have been recovered by Admiral Chen's fleet, along with several Kryzen prisoners taken from disabled vessels. Captain Reyes allowed herself a small, tired smile. The plan had worked exactly as designed, though the tension of the past 3 days, hiding in the ship's core while enemy soldiers walked its corridors just meters away, had taken its toll on everyone involved. Casualties among our own crew? None, Captain. The Watchman system performed exactly as designed. The decoy reactor readings, the false damage patterns, the hidden power network, everything held together perfectly, right up until the activation sequence. And the missile bays? All 312 bays opened simultaneously. Exactly as planned, Captain. The Kryzen fleet never had a chance to organize an effective defense against a barrage of that scale, especially not from a ship they were completely convinced was dead. Captain Reyes walked slowly through her ship's true bridge, looking out at the drifting wreckage visible through the main viewport, the physical evidence of a plan that had taken nearly a year to design and prepare. The Widow's Veil had indeed been badly damaged in a real battle months earlier, exactly as the Kryzen boarding teams had believed. But rather than send the crippled ship for standard repairs, Terran Defense Fleet Command had seen an opportunity. What if a genuinely damaged ship, refitted with hidden weapons and disguised as completely dead, could be used to lure a significant portion of the Kryzen fleet into a devastating trap? The plan had required extraordinary patience and sacrifice. 12 volunteers had willingly entered cryogenic stasis, understanding the risk that something might go wrong during the operation. The ship's true crew had spent months training for an operation that required them to remain perfectly silent and hidden for days at a time, trusting completely in systems and protocols that had never been tested in real combat conditions. And Fleet Admiral Chen's 3rd battle fleet had spent 2 months hiding in a nebula, waiting for the signal that the trap was ready to spring. It had all worked. Every piece of the plan had come together exactly as intended, resulting in the single greatest tactical victory the Terran Defense Fleet had achieved since the war began. News of the battle spread quickly through both human and Kryzen space in the days that followed. For humanity, it was celebrated as a turning point, proof that clever strategy and patient planning could overcome even a numerically superior enemy. Captain Reyes and her crew were honored as heroes, and the story of the Widow's Veil, the ship that pretended to be dead only to unleash devastating firepower on an unsuspecting enemy fleet, quickly became legendary throughout the Terran Defense Fleet. For the Kryzen ascendancy, the battle represented a devastating blow, both militarily and psychologically. 20 warships lost in a single engagement, along with thousands of experienced crew members, dealt a serious setback to their ongoing campaign against human territory. But perhaps more damaging than the material losses was the psychological impact of the defeat. The Kryzen had always believed that human ships, though occasionally unpredictable, could ultimately be understood and countered through careful analysis and overwhelming force. The Widow's Veil shattered that belief entirely, proving that humans were willing to sacrifice ships, risk crew members, and dedicate months of careful planning to a single devastating deception. Admiral Korash Beltan survived the battle, escaping aboard the badly damaged Ashen Talon with the small remnant of his once proud fleet. He faced a formal inquiry upon his return to Kryzen space, where military officials demanded to understand how such a catastrophic defeat had occurred. Korash, to his credit, did not attempt to hide his own responsibility for the disaster. He testified honestly about the warnings he had received and dismissed, about his own overconfidence in the face of a valuable prize, and about the repeated cautions offered by Commander Threx Kadomi throughout the operation. Threx himself was called before the same inquiry, and his testimony, along with the survival of his own ship and crew, earned him a promotion in the aftermath of the disaster. Kryzen Military Command, searching for lessons to prevent similar catastrophes in the future, elevated Threx to a position overseeing intelligence assessment for future engagements with human forces, a role that suited his cautious, careful temperament far better than frontline combat command. "You were right," Korash told him privately, before the formal proceedings concluded, about all of it: the reinforced room, the hidden power source, the convenient discovery of the stasis pods. I saw the warning signs and chose ambition over caution. That mistake cost the lives of thousands of good soldiers. "Hindsight makes fools of us all, Admiral," Threx replied. "You believed what the evidence suggested, and the evidence was designed specifically to deceive careful, competent officers like yourself. This is what makes the humans dangerous. Not simply their weapons, but their patience, and their willingness to sacrifice their own resources for the sake of a larger victory. What do you recommend then? How do we fight an enemy willing to go to such lengths?" Threx considered the question carefully before answering. "We stop assuming that anything is truly as it appears, Admiral. We treat every derelict, every abandoned outpost, every seemingly easy victory, with the same suspicion we would give an active enemy formation. It will slow our operations considerably, and it will frustrate officers eager for quick victories. But it may also save the lives that overconfidence cost us in the Hollow Deep. The lessons learned from the Battle of the Hollow Deep, as it came to be known in human military records, or the Widow's Veil disaster, as the Kryzen came to call it, shaped military strategy on both sides for years to come. Kryzen forces became noticeably more cautious in their approach to salvage operations and unexpected discoveries, often dedicating significant resources to thoroughly verify the true status of any vessel or installation before committing forces to investigate or claim it. This new caution, while prudent, also slowed Kryzen military operations considerably, providing human forces with valuable additional time to prepare defenses and counter-strategies throughout the remainder of the war. For her part, Captain Elena Reyes returned to active duty aboard the Widow's Veil, now openly celebrated rather than hidden, its true capabilities no longer a secret to be protected. The ship underwent a full refit at a secure Terran shipyard, its disguised weapon systems now properly maintained and integrated into its standard combat configuration, ready to serve openly as one of the most powerful vessels in the Terran defense fleet. Years later, long after the war between humans and the Kryzen ascendancy finally reached its conclusion, the story of the Widow's Veil remained one of the most celebrated tales of human military ingenuity. Historians studied the operation extensively, praising the careful planning, the willingness of volunteers to risk their lives for the sake of a larger strategy, and the perfect coordination between the disguised warship and the hidden reserve fleet that delivered the final, devastating blow. Captain Reyes, when asked in later years about the operation that made her ship and her crew legendary, always gave a simple, humble answer. "We didn't do anything special," she would say. "We just understood something about our enemy that they didn't understand about us." They believed that a damaged, silent ship, drifting alone in the dark, had nothing left to give. We knew better. Sometimes the most dangerous thing in the galaxy isn't the enemy standing in front of you with weapons drawn. It's the one lying still, waiting, patient enough to let you believe you've already won. The wreckage in the Hollow Deep remained for years afterward, a silent monument to the battle fought there, drifting slowly through the debris field, alongside the older ruins that had first drawn attention to the region. Occasionally, salvage crews from both human and Kryzen territories would visit the site, though by unspoken agreement, neither side ever attempted to fully clear the wreckage away. It stood instead as a reminder, to both sides of the long war, of the day an aging, damaged warship, written off as dead and harmless, proved that appearances in war, as in life, were rarely as simple as they seemed. And somewhere in the vast archives of Terran Defense Fleet history, the story of the Widow's Veil took its place among the great legends of human resilience and cunning, a tale told and retold for generations, of the ship the enemy thought was abandoned, until the moment it opened every missile bay at once, and changed the course of an entire war in a single, devastating stroke.